Hey, so I'm Nicole and I'm the PM for SCA and I'm with Olivier, and we're going to do a quick chat about the problems I started to see with just how many things we were trying to prioritize, and then what solution Olivier came up with and kind of how he got there. So I'd say, would you say like 6 months ago or so, we started getting security issues in from the security team? It wasn't
Yeah,
that long ago.
yeah, might be already September or something like that, or August last year, probably.
So yeah, it was, we already had bugs that would come in. We would have stuff that would come in from quality. We'd have research stuff. So there was all these tasks that developers had to do on top of feature work and other things they were assigned. And then suddenly we also started to having to do a security triage and assessment of all of our open source projects and the containers that we run. And it just became too much. So I said, what if we just let one person take care of that at a time? And then what did you kind of do to figure out how to make that work?
Yeah, it's not entirely something new. I think we did that years ago, and this is the reaction rotation word itself already existed to do that. But it was a nice opportunity to bring that back because, yeah, as you said, people got distracted from their duty regularly, and the more we're growing, the more customer we have, the more salesperson or support engineers or solution architect are coming to our channel to ask for questions. And this is something that, I mean, Slack is disturbing for engineers that are focused on development, for instance. So this is one good reason. The triaging of vulnerability is another one. Also, keeping up with the changes as we've grown into several teams, we now have more overlapping between each product areas because it's slightly similar, but we are still have our in-depth knowledge for our specific ones, but we need to stay aware about what the other are doing. So this also adds more overhead about the general duty of the engineer. So all of the little things are now handled by a single person every month, but the reality is that this is doable if you have the budget for it. So thanks to you for allowing to reduce I think so far we are allocating around 50% of one engineer every release, more or less. Depends obviously about the amount of requests that we have to handle, but so far I think
Sometimes
it's working
rapid
great.
action happens,
Yeah, that's the other. But yeah, I think it's working great. And at the same time, not working really good for the last few releases because we're working on DB rapid action. But one of the outcome of that is I changed quite substantially changed the expectation for our say-do ratio. We were initially targeting around 70 to 80% of achievement of our deliverable this month, and we've seen some increase in our capability to deliver more than that. So the new OKRs I'm looking for are between 80 and 90% of the deliverables. So this is improving our capacity to deliver what we committed for.
which I'm always happy to get
Yeah.
more things. And would you say there's been like a bunch of feedback? Have we had to change the plan much since we started?
I think most of the fine tuning was around the process. So we wrote that down into the handbook. So we listed clearly what are the different tasks that people have to do. And there is some fine tuning about what the frequency of checking the different tasks. What are the tips that people can use? Obviously, we're doubtful in GitLab. So for instance, we leverage the vulnerability report page to look at the new vulnerabilities that are reported for our tools. But sometimes how we deal with the states, how many times a week you check those things, how do you create a vulnerability, how do you play well with the AppSec team when you need feedback, etc. So this is where we added more fine tuning. Recently, we had another addition, for instance. We want to make sure that when we are upgrading the underlying open source scanner that we use, we're also checking for vulnerability on those upstream repositories. So we mirror them. And so this is an additional task now that you have to do is monitoring those projects too. So anytime we have that kind of recurring duty, we try to add it there. And yeah, that's great because it gives us a single place to define things clearly. And we got some positive feedback from engineers that when they wanted to start that for the first time, everything was written correctly in the same place. And they find that very useful. Yeah.
Awesome. And so I like that you just kind of reuse the name, because naming things sometimes is the hardest part. And I guess the other interesting thing that we did that other people were interested in is I kind of identified that we had a bunch of tech debt and there was kind of recurring themes. And so I just decided to take 2 releases and, you know, let y'all do whatever you thought was the most important thing. How did you work with the engineers to kind of come up with, you know, a ranking system to pick? Because in the end, we picked testing, which is related to like test projects and demo projects and everything. But how did you get from the wide open, anything you want, to testing?
Well, that's really awesome. I mean, most of the time, you're already pretty much aware about the need for engineers to constantly address the technical debt or improve slightly our tooling, etc., to keep being an efficient team. But from time to time, it's difficult to just split things into very small bits that we can inject into the weekly, the monthly cycle. So it's really nice to have this opportunity to pause for a time and have multiple team members focusing on the same improvement. So what we've done is working asynchronously upon an issue and let people just throw ideas that improvement they would like to work on, issue they had in their day-to-day basis, the most impactful that they had into their workflow. And after maybe 2 or 3 months, I think, of gathering these informations, we just go with voting, just using emojis. People were voting on the thread because we
so kind of like a retro issue,
yeah,
like when a retro issue
like the retro. And we ended up sorting the items like that. We did some synchronous sessions to discuss a bit about that. And after we did this, I spent some time trying to highlight similarities between all those different topics, and we ended up with those high-level categories. So we had 3 of them. The first one was about testing, then it was about development environments, and then feature and architectural changes. This ended up at the last position, but at the same time, we often consider that this improvement will come as part of the product development anyway. So this was more interesting to leverage that opportunity for improving our testing framework, our testing processes, etc., and the development environment.
Awesome. So yeah, it was kind of borrowing from the retro style. You took a couple months, let everybody get ideas, and then we're starting, fingers crossed, in what, 3 days, 4 days? So
yeah, and that would be great, because again, this is the little things that are constantly in the way of the engineer. I mean, testing, this is a huge part of the day-to-day tasks. So any improvement we can do there will be really beneficial for the team, because less frustration, more efficiency, but also for you because it will be faster at working on the product. So yeah, that's really a good thing, I think, and really happy to have that.
awesome. Well, thank you for sharing.
Thanks.